Okay, it's time to get started. Thank you everyone for joining our live lecture today. My name is Isaac and I'll be the lead instructor for the lecture. And today's topic will be career skills. So diving right in, let's go ahead and let's talk about career planning first. Okay, so career programmers are a lot like doctors in the way that they tend to specialize in one specific field. Okay, so you know how doctors split up into different specialties like oncology, cardiology, pediatrics, that kind of thing. So same thing with career programmers, right? You tend to specialize. But at first, it's very common to not know what career direction you want to take. And if you don't know that, there is a technique known as SWOT that you can use to help you figure out where you fit in. Okay, and SWOT is an acronym that stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So let's go ahead and go through each of those. Okay, so strengths would be if maybe you're someone who's creative, motivating, energetic, right? Then things like weaknesses would be impatient, outspoken, unrealistic. Opportunities would be like what's available in the market right now and in the near future, right? So right now, front-end engineers, back-end engineers, data scientists, right? Those are all really relevant, prominent job positions. And then you've got threats, things that can prevent you from accomplishing your career goals, like criminal history, unemployment, finances, and so on. Okay, so next let's talk about your soft skills. Okay, so the vast majority of people who become programmers have several other non-technical skills that have been acquired through previous employment and through education are transferable to the programming job. Okay, so these are things such as interpersonal skills, how you act with others, organizational skills, how you approach tasks, leadership skills, how you motivate and direct others, and communication skills, how you communicate with others. Okay, and so whenever you're applying for a job, just remember that there's several other technical people that are applying for that job too. And a lot of times you're going to have the same level of experience or less than the other candidate applying for that same job. So what you've got to do is you've got to add value to yourself by making these soft skills apparent, identifying them, and offering them as a an additional asset as yourself as a potential hire. Okay, so next let's discuss your tech resume. Okay, so there's 3 C's of resume building. So the first one's it needs to be clean, easy to read font, proofread, and not cluttered. It needs to be concise, okay, short, sweet, and to the point. And it needs to be convincing, okay? So don't try to oversell it using crazy big vocabulary, and don't, be lazy and only list 2 of your skills, right? Make sure that it lists what you know and really just that. Next, let's discuss that the most important information on your resume. Okay, so although everyone has different processes for viewing resumes, the statistics tell us that you have around 7 to 10 seconds of viewing time by a hiring manager. So that being said, the focus of the most important information should be at the top half of your resume. Okay, so the 3 most important things you need to include, the first one would be your professional links to your GitHub and LinkedIn profile. Okay, and then your tech skills and your project examples. So let's take a minute to first look at an example of a bad resume, and then we'll look at a good one. So first, right off the bat, we have an ugly big blue graphic, very distracting on the side here, right? So no graphics, no images, nothing like that. Just make it all text-based, okay? Next, this is not very concise, right? It's 2 pages long. It feels very, very heavy, okay? Next, you'll notice that although they did list their GitHub link, they forgot to list their LinkedIn. And why that's bad is a non-technical manager is not going to be able to understand how to evaluate a candidate based off their GitHub link. They're going to need LinkedIn. Okay, so that's why it's good to include both. Next, they list their tech skills, which that's good, right? We're supposed to put that at the top half. However, they put their projects down here at the bottom half of the resume, and they put education before that. Okay, and although the education does add value to you, projects add even more value. And the reason is because you can say you studied at every university in the world, but at the end of the day, unless you have some actual projects to show for it, really doesn't hold a lot of weight. Okay, and that's why we encourage you to put projects before education, and make sure it's at the top half here. Okay, so now we've seen an example of a bad resume. Let's take a look at an example of a good resume. Okay, so as you can see, first things first, we have a LinkedIn and GitHub profile at the very top. Then we have tech skills, and then we have projects. Okay, and then we can even include links to these projects, right? So they can easily click them and go view those on the web. Okay, and then below, some other points we can add, right, in case they do read the bottom half. We can put education, things like professional experience, a volunteer, right? But, overall, just, keep it relevant and, the 3 C's, right? Clean, concise, all that good stuff. So next, let's go ahead and let's discuss 10 things never to put on your resume. Okay, so the first one, never put things like misspelled words or bad grammar, right? There's so many spell checking tools these days. There's really no excuse to have that on your resume. Number 2, never include things like personal information such as social security number. Okay, so although they might ask you that if they're doing a background check or, they're planning to hire you, but, don't just put that on your resume, because your resume is oftentimes sent in an email and then it's printed out, and, it might just end up in the wrong hands. So you want to protect yourself in this way. Number 3, never include things like jokes, right? Keep it strictly professional. And really, that's all there is to it. Number 4, don't include irrelevant work or job experience. Okay, so a lot of people will tell you, oh, it's better to have some experience than no experience. But in the tech industry, that's actually not true. If the only job you've ever had is working at Aunt Sally's, in the summer of '03, babysitting, well, you shouldn't put that on your resume, okay? It's better just have no experience in that situation, because some job experience you do have is just not relevant. Okay, number 5, never include things like meaningless words that you don't use in your everyday vocabulary. Okay, so some applicants will try to fluff up their resumes and make themselves sound really smart by using really large words, that aren't used on a regular basis, right? And really, these are more red flags than anything for a recruiter or hiring manager, because they view thousands of resumes and they get a real good idea of how people talk on an everyday basis. And when they see people who use, big fancy words, it comes off as you're trying to compensate for the fact that maybe you aren't really qualified for the job you're applying for, right? So just, be yourself and keep to your regular vocabulary in that regard. All right. Number 6, never include reasons for leaving previous positions. Okay, so although it's pretty common for them to ask this in maybe a interview or a job application, right? You can answer it at that time, but don't put that on your resume. It's just a waste of space, right? We have only got 1 page to work with, and that fills up fast. Okay, number 7, never include hobbies. Again, keep it strictly professional. Number 8, never include salary requirements. Okay, although, they might ask you this on a job application or in an interview, right? Don't put that on your resume, because it comes off as, you're really just kind of there for the money and you don't believe in the mission of the company, or, going beyond just, the regular 9 to 5, right? And they want to believe you're there for a bigger purpose. So that being said, leave the salary requirements off the resume. Number 9, never include references, okay? Again, this is just a waste of space. You don't have that much landscape to work with, so you want to make sure that, the only information you're putting on there is adding to your value. Number 10, never include unprofessional contact information, right? So if you have an inappropriate or maybe even just an immature email that, you created back in junior high or high school, maybe you need to go and create a new one, right? Because those first impressions with, can be a really a big thing when it comes to people viewing your resume and your information, right? And so you want to make sure that you don't shoot yourself in the foot in that regard. Okay, so next let's talk about networking. Okay, so there's two kinds of networking. There's in-person networking, and then there is online networking. Okay, and so in-person networking actually happens to be the #1 way to get a job in the tech industry. While online networking is great, in-person networking is even more effective. And why is that? Well, because of something called the hidden market. And the hidden market is in the tech industry, 80% of job openings are not posted online. Okay, and so that might strike you as weird because it's the tech industry, right? You would think that all the tech companies would use online ads to recruit, but this is actually not the case. Most of the time, they just ask their internal staff for recommendations. And so it's really good to get to know developers in your area because oftentimes those developers are working at companies, and those companies oftentimes lean on their developers for internal recruiting. Okay, so to meet these other developers, you can go to things called meetups. Okay, and meetups are just where you'll go and oftentimes they'll train you on how to perform a certain task, right? A little workshop on coding an app in Java or Python or Ruby, whatever, right? And then afterwards there'll be a little social hour with snacks and drinks, and this is your chance to go and talk to people and meet the people in programming in your area in that industry. And so that way you can make the connections for when they do ask their staff for internal recommendations, you come to the top of everyone's mind, right? They say, oh, we see this guy at meetups all the time and he's really, seems really knowledgeable, or, we meet this, girl at meetups all the time and, she seems really, just smart and on top of her coding game, right? Let's bring her in for an interview. So you just never know who you're going to meet. And not only may you meet the employees at these meetups, but sometimes you'll even meet hiring managers or the CEO of the company, right? You just oftentimes get to have opportunities that others would never get in, say, an online setting, right? Where you can't go up and shake their hand and make that connection. So that's why in-person networking has proven to be most effective. And so if you are looking to network in person, we recommend using meetup.com and eventbrite.com because they just have tons of events that you can attend. Most of them are for free, and they have really easy search engines for your area, and they'll just show you all the little meetups going on near you. Okay, next let's talk about finding the right fit. Okay, so it's always best to do a bit of research about an organization before you apply for the position. And it's important for a couple of reasons. The first off being, when you're in the interview, it always kind of adds to your value if you know a little bit about the company, because it shows that you care actually about what they do and not just the paycheck, right? Every company, every employer wants to believe you're there for a bigger purpose than just the paycheck. So this is why it's good to sound a little bit knowledgeable about the company, right? And so another reason might be that everyone's culture is different, right? Some of us like to sit back in a beanbag and code and never talk to customers or anything like that, but others maybe want to be in the room with customers, right? Maybe we want a more corporate environment where we wear professional dress code. So everyone prefers different things as far as working environments go. So make sure that you do research and, you don't find out the hard way when you get hired that you really hate who you work with or how they, operate on a day-to-day basis. So a little bit of research can go a long way in that regard. Okay, so now let's talk about the online job search. Okay, so while the in-person job search is the most effective way, the online job search is definitely an effective method of getting a job in the tech industry as well. Okay, and so while there are tons of job boards to choose from, here are a few that our students have found success with. Okay, so Indeed.com, you've probably heard of this one, probably the biggest job board in the world. Monster.com comes a close second. Dice.com, another good one. And Craigslist, although this isn't technically a job board per se, you will oftentimes find smaller gigs maybe from restaurants in the area, right, that just need a website, something to that nature, and this can add to your portfolio projects and bring in some money while you're maybe searching for a full-time gig, right? So those are all great places to conduct an online job search. Okay, so let's reiterate on your email and voicemail, right? Your contact information. So although it might seem kind of like common knowledge, adjusting your email and voicemail during a job search period can make a big difference on how potential employers view you. Okay, so let's take a look at a bad email, right? JohnnyLadiesMan89@gmail.com, right? It comes off as very immature, very arrogant, and makes a really bad first impression. Versus john.smith@gmail.com, it's very simple. It's very hard to get offended by, and it's just very to the point. So you want something along the lines of this for your email, and then for your voicemail, it really should just be short and to the point. Okay, no drunk voicemails, nothing like that. It should be professional, and the person leaving you a message shouldn't be annoyed by the time they're done with the call. Okay, next, let's talk about LinkedIn. Okay, so if you don't know already, LinkedIn is the world's largest networking platform for business professionals. Okay, so that being said, you will definitely need a LinkedIn account if you hope to be successful in your job hunt. Okay, so once you get a LinkedIn profile, you'll need to whip it into shape by adding your information. So let's go ahead and let's take a moment to look at an example of a good LinkedIn profile. So first off, we've got the photo. Okay, and as we can see, it's an up-to-date photo, it's recent, and he is smiling. Okay, so make sure you're smiling in the photo. You never want a photo where you're not smiling, okay, because it just comes off as unfriendly. Okay, second headline, tell people about what you're excited about now, the cool things you want to do in the future. Okay, summary, this little section here is just a little, 2-3 paragraphs about yourself, and, kind of all wrapped up into one there. Experience is just like an online resume. So you can just list the company you worked at, the time frame you worked there, description of your duties, and even link it to their website, whatever else. Organizations, pretty self-explanatory. If you're part of any organizations, you can add that. Maybe Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, etc. Education, if you've obtained a degree, from a university or college, to that nature, make sure you add that. Definitely adds value to you as a candidate. Volunteer experience, this is pretty self-explanatory. If you volunteered at, maybe local senior centers or whatever else in the area, make sure you list that, because it's definitely adds value to you as a candidate, right? Because it just shows that you're willing to do work without being paid for it, and oftentimes that means you're willing to work hard without necessarily needing to be paid $1 million. Okay, next we got skills and expertise. And I really like this section myself because it allows you to go in and you can list all your skills. And as developers, that's good because we oftentimes have a lot more than one skill, right? We don't just say, hey, we can do programming. We can say, hey, we can do HTML and CSS, and we can do JavaScript, and we can just add all of those there. And then after you add them, you can have your connections, which are very much like, friends. And they come in and they can endorse you for these skills. So the more endorsements you have, the more it adds weight that you can actually perform that skill that you listed. So next we got honors and awards. And, that's pretty self-explanatory. If you have any achievements, go ahead and list those there. Courses, if you've taken courses, maybe not so much to obtain a degree, right? Just maybe specialty courses, get certified in a certain area of software, right? Maybe Scrum technologies or Scrum certification, right? Maybe list that there. And then we got projects as well, and projects are great because as developers, we can list the projects, we can put descriptions on them, and we can put links so people can navigate those projects and view them and get a feel for our abilities as developers. And then finally, we got recommendations down here. Recommendations are just like verbal endorsements, right? Where we have our connections, let the world know basically why you would want to hire this person based on their professional experience with you. Okay. So next, let's talk about a good GitHub profile. Okay, so as you can see, first thing right off the bat, we've got a recent photo and she is smiling. Okay, next we've got a decent amount of repositories, right? So if I am a technical manager, I've actually got something to look at. Worst thing we can have is an empty code base, right? Because then it makes us look like we aren't very active developers. Next good thing here is, she's actually got some followers, right? So that adds to her value and relevance. And so as you can see, it's much less complex than LinkedIn because it's just basically based on your skills as a developer. But this is the basic idea you're going for in constructing a good GitHub profile. Next, let's talk about online branding. Okay, so in the tech-driven era, employers often look at online sources that don't have anything to do with you as a professional, but rather who you are as a person in general. Okay, so example of good online branding would be if you have a high number of profile followers, right? Just like we saw a minute ago, that was good to have profile followers, and that actually adds to that candidate's value. Whereas example of bad branding would be pictures of you drinking at last night's party, right? So if you had that on your Facebook account and you had, those pictures posted every single night, well, then the employer might get the impression that you're going to come and hung over every day, or some assumption to that nature, and that could hurt your chances of getting hired. So if you are doing a job search, it's good to clean up any social profiles you think may cause damage in that regard. All right, next let's talk about something called the elevator pitch. Okay, so the elevator pitch is a technique that is used to answer the prompt, tell me about yourself. And a lot of us have actually heard this question in many different interviews than just tech interviews, right? And so it's a very common icebreaker for a lot of employers. They'll just start off with this question. And oftentimes, a lot of us just kind of get nervous and blurt off, just whatever comes to our mind. My name is this, and I've lived here for this long, and I enjoy doing this on my off time, right? Or whatever else. And it doesn't ever really add value to us as a candidate. So to take advantage of that question, to actually add value, we can use something called the elevator pitch. And it's broken down like this. It needs to be 30 to 60 seconds, right? You don't want too long, drag it on too long, but you don't want it to be too short either, where, you basically don't sound interesting. Okay, so 30 to 60 seconds in length. And then it should list three things. It should list what you do well, aka your skills. It should list what you want to do, your goals, and it should list why you want to do it. Okay, and if you construct an elevator pitch, you can also practice it. And so when they ask you this prompt, you can actually come off as very confident and execute it in a very professional manner, to where you're going to come off more prepared than other candidates, which, of course, is always a good thing. Okay, so now let's go ahead and talk about the tech interview. Okay, so although, technical interviews come in all shapes and sizes, there's no actual one way to prepare. Okay, so instead, it's just best to use, the commonly used scenarios out there that you may encounter during an interview. And so here's a few sites that we recommend to practice for your tech interview skills. Okay, so first one is coderbyte.com. Coderbyte.com allows you to do daily challenges, and they actually have a level, so you can actually see your level increase. So you start off with easy programming questions, and then they eventually get harder and harder and harder. And a lot of these questions you'll see appear in interviews. Okay, so this is why it's good to use Coderbyte, because it'll keep you sharp. Next, codefights.com is another great one, because it puts you on the spot against their developer to build a specific application, and that gets you used to working under pressure. And of course, we all know that an interview is a lot of pressure, right? And especially if we're asked to do things like code or whiteboard, right? A lot of times that pressure can make us go blank or whatever else. So it's good to practice for that environment beforehand. And then interview.cake, excuse me, InterviewKate.com is another great one because they actually show you how to methodically think through interview questions and explain them in ways where you may not get the answer technically, but because your approach, you actually get some credit for the question. Okay, so we recommend checking out all three of those to give yourself, best fighting chance during your interview. Okay, and then let's go ahead and wrap up with the topic of follow-up. Okay, so as in most industries, it's good to follow up with the hiring managers on your submitted applications as well as your previous interviews. Keep in mind that the hiring manager is often cycling through tons of applications, so it helps to have someone reach out to them to make yourself more memorable. And this is absolutely true. Oftentimes they'll get two candidates and they'll bring both of them in for an interview, and both candidates interview really well and they've got the same amount of tech skills, and the company is really torn. They just don't know which one to hire. And then one developer calls in to follow up on their resume and their interview, and one developer doesn't. And so more than likely, the developer who calls in to follow up is going to get the job because they show just a little more initiative. And really, sometimes that's all it takes to tip them in your direction. Okay, so make sure you follow up, because even though you think you might have not got the job, we have had so many students who have called back and they ended up getting the job because they showed a little more initiative than other candidates. So that being said, let's go and open up the floor and let's see if anyone has any questions before we end today. Okay, so the floor is open. Feel free to ask away. Okay, I don't believe we have any questions. So if that's the case, thanks everyone for stopping by. Have a great day and happy job hunting out there.